Town of Waukesha on-site sewage disposal system. Mike?
Yes, thank you. I have nothing concrete at this time. However, I would offer that when to help expedite the time on these meetings, that I will certainly pass information to the office and alert everyone when I do have something to offer. And it'll be placed on the agenda. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Laska, this has been going on for quite a number of months. The town of Waukesha taxpayers have spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 on this. Do you have any preliminary plans, drawings, specs, something that we would have for our about $10,000?
I totally disagree with you, John, on money spent on the septic system. The money was spent for the water hookup with the city.
I don't understand. We spent about $2,500 or $3,500 with Ruckert and Melke last year, the year before last actually, and then another $7,500 this last year on engineering. And what do we have to show for our about $10,000 that we have spent? What the taxpayers have spent a good sum of money. Do we have a preliminary drawing, a spec, a plan? What do we have?
He's on the phone, isn't he?
Yeah, he's on the phone.
He's on the phone. Larry, just put him on speaker. Put him on speaker.
Mike, you there? Okay, go ahead.
So Mike, the question was, what do you have? Do we have anything to show the town taxpayers for the about $10,000 that we have spent on this issue?
I'm not going to repeat myself any longer. I told you I spent $0 on the septic system. The money that was spent for a hookup with the city. And that got the axe based on your vote to continue once we did get the green light in October from the city to go forward.
I'm not sure I understand. You said I voted to axe some plan?
There was, in order to proceed, once we got the okay from the city to have a water hookup without annexation, then we needed more money to go forward, and your vote and Mr. Fischer's vote stopped that dead in its tracks from happening.
Okay, so up to that point, what have we spent $10,000 on is my question.
I think, Mike, I think we know what we spent it on. We know for a fact that Christianelli was working with the city, that the city had multiple delays in getting their language right after they approved it. Terry Themey delayed the vote one time at the city. We know that Christianelli had reported to us that he was unable to draft plans and come up with cost estimates because he needed to know the size of the lateral. There was conversation about the fact that the city would require us, instead of hooking up where the laterals already across from the park identification sign, that they wanted us to carry the line and pay for that potentially all the way down to the southernmost tip of our property. These were all of the requirements that Chris Janelli had stated was in flux and that he needed information on to draft plans. Once those were approved, Mike came back and said he needed money to fund that project, that Chris had alerted him that Chris Janelli's efforts had expended the funds that were available. And in order to do that work, the drawings and the plans and the specs and all of that stuff, we needed to fund more money. A budget amendment was presented. It did not pass by a 2/3 majority. It had a 3 out of 5 majority, a simple one, but that doesn't carry the budget amendment. So it was denied, and there was no money for Chris Janelli to do any work, so certainly none was done. The only other work that I'm aware of that was done was that an exploration into what it would cost to put in a septic and a holding tank for the fire department, which is probably what should have been done during the design period when the fire department was added. That was explored and the options were worked on, and then you run into the winter when it's too cold to break ground and do work and get those things done. And we don't have money to explore doing the engineering work for the city, so we're kind of stuck with, we've got some bids to put in a septic and a holding tank, and we can't find out what it might cost to connect to the city because the engineer has no money to do any of the work because we didn't get a successful budget amendment last year. We can put this item back on the agenda every 2 weeks like we do and publicly flog Mike, but I don't think that that's productive any longer. I think it's ridiculous when we all know everything that I've just said has been reported over and over and over.
My question's a little bit different, Mr. Banske. My question is, for $7,500 that we gave to the Rupert Milky firm, that was supposed to get us to a point of drawings. My question is different. What do we have to show for our $7,500 from last year that we gave to Rupert Milky for the engineering that was supposed to get us to a point of drawings?
I don't believe that that was to get us to a point of drawings. I believe that that was to work with the city to get the approval and understand what the scope and the process would be with them, because I don't remember Chris Janelli sitting here saying that he could get us to engineered drawings sitting here at $7,500 when he had no idea of what they were even going to do or require for us. So I don't recall that that was the conversation. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying that I don't recall that that was what that money was to provide. But clearly, Chris Janelli billed those dollars to the town. This town board, with the exception of Mr. Fischer, who has abstained to the Rupert and Milky bills, have approved those bills. So if there was a question as to what Christopher Janelli did in charging for that work, those were questions that I think should have been brought up at that time and should have been posed to Christopher Janelli, not to Mike Laska, because we each had a vote in those Rupert and Milky bills.
Mr. Banske, we have been asking the same question for months. What progress has been made for the about $10,000 that have been spent on this project? And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. I'd like to know what I spent partially my money on. What have we to show for our 10 grand? That's my question.
I believe Mr. Janelli's bills are rather detailed if you look at the supporting documents or if you've asked him for supporting documents. I think that that question is something that if you have that question, you should pose to Chris. I think he'd be able to answer that very quickly and very thoroughly.
Mr. Fischer?
Yeah, Supervisor Laska, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I'd like to give you an opportunity to, if you would please correct your misstatement. On the record here, you indicated that I voted against expending additional money to Rupert and Milky. That is not true. I abstained and I need to. So will you please correct the record in that regard?
I will correct the record in this way. In order, yes, you're absolutely correct.
Thank
You did not vote against the Rupert and Belkey bill. However, the residents that sit in that room should understand that a super majority vote is needed to obtain monies from the general fund. And virtually, one vote stops, or two votes stop that from happening. One can be a no, and one can be an abstain. And yes, you're absolutely right, Brian. However, the point I wanted to make was it got axed. The money got axed to proceed accordingly with the city.
And the point that I wanted to make is your representation that I was part of axing it is not true. I abstained on the budget amendment, and I have no choice because I have a conflict of interest. Thank you.
I guess we'll move on. Authorization to pay the bills, we've got $109,792.89. Does anybody need to take any of these separately?
I just have one question, and if someone here is not prepared to answer that, so be it, and we may get the answer to this at the next meeting. But does anyone know, are all of these monies to be taken out of the 2013 budget, or do some of them apply to 2014? And not asking anybody to guess. I don't know the answer to that question. Does anybody know?
I believe this, we don't have it. I don't think anything in here that's from the 2014 budget yet.
Okay, and I guess, and I'm not asking anybody to make that representation, but I guess I would just ask that we could have that clarified at the next meeting, that we can proceed with that assumption. I'd just like to have that clarified.
Perhaps we could find out if Jamie's still in the office, we could ask that question.
Okay?
Let's find out.
Thank you.
And the answer is, most of this is 13. We are not over on any line items for 2013, other than the two amendments that we made this evening. We don't have a P&L for 2014 yet because that budget is being entered into the computer system still.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I move to pay the bills.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Good evening, everybody.